This is KCCK's Culture Crawl. I'm Dennis Green, and my guests today are David Lee Nelson and Adam Knight from Riverside Theater's upcoming production of Stages. Welcome, gentlemen.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you for having us.
Adam, of course, is here regularly to talk about Riverside Productions as the artistic director. And David, this is your play that you have written and performed in. It's a one-man show about your experience with colon cancer. Yes?
Yeah, that's exactly what this thing is.
And so just at first blush, it's, oh, yay, a play about colon cancer. And it has an interesting history about the two of you, which I really want to talk about. But before we get there, just kind of talk to me just a little bit about, how you came to decide that one of the ways that you were going to deal with, the treatment and the recovery from your disease was going to be to get up and stay on stage and do a play about it.
Yeah, that's a great question. So Adam and I know each other from high school. We grew up together and we both did theater. My career kind of went a little bit of a different direction. After grad school, I started doing stand-up comedy. And I was in New York City. I was a professional comedian. I was on the road. So, and I always wrote about myself because I was told very early on, if you write about yourself, no one can copy you or steal from you, or they look weird doing it.
Write what you know.
Yeah, write what you know, exactly. So that was, the start of my career. So I always wrote about my life. I wrote about, the good things and the bad things. And I found very early on that kind of the bad things that happened were actually the funniest things. And then in 2008, Adam said in passing one day to me, he said, I've always wanted to direct a stand-up show. It was like at 2 a.m. We're at a bar in the Lower East Side. And I was like, oh, that sounds like fun. So we kind of did that. And so we did our first solo show in 2008 or 9 it was. And this is our fourth one. We can talk about that a little later. But so when I got diagnosed, I was already writing about myself every day, and this was just now on my plate. So it was just very natural. It was a natural progression for me to write about, getting an MRI, and then it was very natural for me to find, the humor in getting an MRI because they're very loud and I don't think anyone knows, it's like a jackhammer going off 3 feet from your face and they give you music to listen to. So you're listening to like jazz music while a jackhammer is going off. And my MRI tech thought jazz meant like elevator music and not John Coltrane. So, I was like, this is just a ridiculous experience. And I think so ripe with humor. So natural that I would write and create a show about this.
What about the barriers that you encountered with people who say, yeah, cancer's no laughing matter?
Sure,
you can't make fun of something this serious.
Absolutely. And I completely, understand where they're coming from. I think that a lot of times laughter is the last weapon we against things that are this huge. And again, I think there's this, I think there's a bit of a misconception that laughter or humor means you're making fun of something or making light of something. I would actually say it's quite the opposite. I think sometimes we can laugh at things, or we have to laugh at things that are so serious, because again, that's the last way we have to cope.
Exactly. How else will we cope?
Yeah, exactly.
Didn't somebody say once, comedy equals tragedy plus time?
Yeah, Adam Knight said that.
Yeah. It's in my book of quotes.
Yeah.
That's why, Chekhov is funny. Great productions of Chekhov, these people are just weeping and then they're laughing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's been, David and I, talk all the time. And our joke when he was in the hospital with the surgery was, oh, now we know what the next solo play's about.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think that there's something about... I think that part of why we're such a good team is that we've seen so many bad solo plays, and we've seen so many bad plays that try to be meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that part of what David's kind of natural MO is to write from his experience and just to be very specific that this is his story, not anyone else's story. And I think that that's why his plays intrigue me, and I think that's why they kind of speak to other people, because we're not trying to be meaningful. I think once you try to be meaningful, that's where kind of the shamming begins.
Yeah, we're trying to. There's this great book about comedy. It's called Truth in Comedy, and the theory of that book is that the truth is funny. And what we've really tried to do with stages in all our solo shows, but really with stages, is to write the truth of what I went through, and a natural byproduct of that is humor.
And we're all, I mean, David and I are both, now we're on the other side of 40, and there's this, we're already going through this moment of what are we doing with our lives? What are we doing? And in some ways, what this diagnosis that David got kind of propelled you a little faster into asking the same questions I think a lot of people our age are asking, which is now that we have a better understanding of kind of our limitations,
Mm-hmm.
how can we keep moving forward as an artist, as a friend, as a lover, as a human being in this world that is constantly throwing us curveballs?
Tell me about the timetable. Obviously, you were doing, I'm sure that you were writing and thinking through this while you were in treatment, but you had probably passed, by the time you performed it, were you still undergoing any of, your chemo or anything at the time that you started working on it?
That's a great question. So my fiance and I had moved to Atlanta in 2016, and I'd taken a little break from stand-up to teach, and Adam and I did Hamlet together and to do some more theatrical things. But in 2016, I moved to Atlanta, which is a great theater scene, great comedy scene. So I moved to do stand-up again full-time. And and then I got sick at the start of 2017, and I was still writing, every day. And I was sending jokes to my friend who was a comic in LA, and he was like, "Oh, how'd that bit go?" And I was like, "Dude, I'm like hooked up to chemo. I'm not going to the open mic at Frank's Chuckle Hut." You know what I mean? And he was like, "Oh, well,
I'm entertaining the techs here
I
at
know,
the hospital.
it's like, I don't know
you
what
wouldn't
you
believe.
want. Sorry." And he was like, "It's really good stuff. You should do something with it." He was like, "Maybe write a blog." And I was like, "Dude, blogs are for losers." And he was like, "Oh, well, my friend just got a pilot from writing a blog." And I was like, "Oh, I'm definitely writing a blog."
Blogs are not for
blogs
losers.
are perfect. So I actually started writing a blog when I started chemo. The blog was twofold. It was one to kind of have a place where I could do, a home for some of the stuff I was writing, and two, when you get something like this, you wind up telling the same story 10 times in a row to like your uncle, your aunt, your sister. So I thought the blog would be a place where people could come and kind of see what was going on. And so the blog kind of took off, and people were reading it and sharing it, and newspapers writing articles about it. So I wrote that from April 19th when I started to October when I finished, and that became the basis of the show, and it became the basis of the show. And so after I was done with chemo, Adam and I got together at my family's farmhouse in eastern North Carolina, and we spent 3 days reading all the stuff we'd created. And so from there, it was another 6 months, and we had a show. And yeah, I've been on, the cool thing about seeing theater with performed by someone who wrote the piece and who's still around is that it changes, it breathes, it lives, it's a living piece. So I've had a lot of life happen since this play opened, and so the play does reflect the changes in me and the changes in the treatment, and we try to make the play very present to right now.
Adam, directing this play, usually the director has some, has a lot of emotional distance from the work, whether it personally resonates with them or not. But this is a case where this is your friend.
Yeah.
And even though he's on the other side, and he's obviously, he's doing well, still there had to be moments, either when you were exchanging stuff, in the early days, or when you were going through all of that it just had to be very emotional.
Yeah, and there's still some parts of the play that are kind of for me. I mean, yesterday there's a lot of projections in the play, and there was just a picture I loved, and our lighting designer, who's been with the show from the beginning, Lauren Duffy, who's our dear, dear friend. There was a picture of her and Davy in the play, and we just loved it, and it's for us. I mean, and I try to find little things in the play that are kind of filling my need as a friend and as a co-creator, and if it's personal to me, I think it's going to be personal to the audience. This was a great chance for us to, I think, work through and I guess have an outlet to be talking about these things. David and I don't sit around all day talking about, the emotional rigors of, of 12 rounds of chemotherapy. But so this became a way for I think, me to understand better what he was going through and to help him find shape to it. It's been incredibly rewarding.
Do you mind me asking what your
Yeah.
prognosis is long term, David?
don't it's still very ongoing for me. I mean, I had treatment yesterday and then got on a plane and flew out here. So it's still a very present thing I'm dealing with. And I like to think of the blog as like and the show too. It's an inside look at life in the face of, this thing, because life doesn't stop. I still have to be a good, boyfriend and soon to be a husband. I still have to be a good son. I still have to be a good teacher. I still have to be a good writer. I still have a student loan bill. You know what I mean? And I think so often we think that when you get something like this, your life it doesn't. It keeps going, and we live in the face of it. Jamie still yells at me, my fiance, for not making the bed when I get up, or not knowing how to load a dishwasher. So we feel like this play really humanizes the person going through it. And that's why the medical community is actually so connected with the piece. The idea of seeing something from the patient's perspective has been really exciting for nurses and doctors and medical students.
Yeah, tell me about how you've gotten the University of Iowa hospitals involved.
We're really proud to be partnering with Holden Comprehensive Cancer Center on this play. They're sponsoring the production. Some of their adolescent young adult patients and families are having a kind of private Q&A with David.
Can I stop right there? Because I want Adam to finish, but there is a colon cancer is on the rise amongst people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. It's on the downslope in the overall population. But there's actually a real and one of the things about this show, I hate the word awareness, but I want to shed some light on that thing as well.
Yeah, and part of why we're doing it in March is for Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month. Holden Comprehensive Cancer Center is having an event on March 3rd in their atrium. There's apparently a giant inflatable colon. So if you've ever
take a walk through the colon.
Yes,
and dreams do come true.
And it's and also we're having a panel discussion on March 7th with an oncologist and a surgeon and a GI specialist from Holden, speaking with David and talking about the things that the play brings up. In some ways, in a strange way, the medical community is an underserved community. They're not underserved because they lack the resources to see theater, but there's not a lot of plays that speak to their experiences or that invite them in. And this is an opportunity. I think one thing we've got in spades here in the corridor is amazing medical minds. And we're very lucky for that. And I thought this play would be a great opportunity to welcome them in, to have them share some of their stories, to hear a play that's from a patient's perspective, very much about the doctor-patient relationship, and also that speaks to their patient and family community. And this is a disease that affects 9 million Americans. And so this play, I think, hits on something that almost every one of us have been touched by.
Talking with Adam and David about Stages, which opens
February 28th and runs through March 15th.
So several weeks to see the show. We've, kind of gotten into this pretty heavy, but David, in the time we have remaining, tell us a little story out of the play and out of your experience, if you can, if there's a moment that you can think of.
Sure. well, let's think of a fun story out of this. Okay, well, so very much like this room here. The week before I went in for surgery, the doctors are trying to figure out what was going on with me. They just didn't know. And I was recording an audiobook. When I was in Atlanta, I got into doing voiceover stuff. And I was in a recording studio like this. And so at that point, like my stomach was in a lot of pain. And it was also very loud. Like you could hear it like grumbling across the room. And so I was in this, and I'm also very like embarrassed and shy about like any sort of like things like that. So I was in this recording studio reading this audiobook, and my stomach was making these like horrible noises. And like every 10 minutes, the sound engineer in the room next door was like stopping me. He was like, dude, I can hear your stomach. Yeah, I got your stomach again. It's like, dude, is there something wrong with your stomach? What's going on? And it was like so embarrassing. And they had these like pillows on the floor of the studio, and I like picked them up and I like held them like this just to like muffle the sound in any way, shape, or form. But those are the things we're talking about. Like those are the things that like are, they don't tell you about that. Also like every medical room and lobby at Emory has HGTV on the television, and I like hate HGTV, and it drives me insane. Like as I'm about to get chemo, I have to watch like House Hunters and like Flip or Flop and Your House is Ugly, and it's those like human things that are such a part of cancer treatment, as much as the not feeling good on the way out.
The play is Stages at Riverside Theater, created and performed by David and Adam, and you both have, your relationship is a huge part of this, as much as it is a show at Riverside.
Yeah, and Adam Knight, we're obviously so thrilled. Everyone's so thrilled that he's here as the artistic director. But this show, especially, Adam directs it, but he really co-created it. And so for people who have seen shows at Riverside or who've been thinking about seeing shows at Riverside, this show is a really great way to get an inside look, not only as Adam as a director, but also as a creator of theater. This show has Adam's hands all over it, from the production design to how the script is created. So, I think that's just a real gift he's giving to the people of Iowa City, that this is a show you wouldn't be able to see anywhere else. This is really theater that is from the person who's running this institution.
Stages runs February 28th through March 15th.
Yep.
At Riverside Theater. And if people want tickets, they can get them on your website, which is
www.riversidetheater.org.
And if you want to find out more about me and my blog, you can go to davidleenelson.com/blog.
All right. Well, thanks so much for coming in. I've been looking forward to having this conversation with both of you ever since Adam told me about the show, and really looking forward to the production.
Thanks.
And good luck with the CD sale.
You can hear the Culture Crawl live on the radio most weekdays at 10:20, or download the podcast, watch or listen on your own schedule at kcck.org/culture, or using your favorite podcast app. I'm Dennis Green. I'll talk to you later.